Hello and welcome. I'm conductor Raffaele Ponti, and this is Behind the Notes, an opportunity for us to get to know and learn more about world-class musicians and artists. And today, my guest is the amazing percussionist, Dean Anderson. Welcome, Dean.
Hey, how's everybody out there in the virtual world?
Thank you for doing this. We're excited to learn and get to know you better. So
Sure.
I know you've had an illustrious career, and we're going to go over all those details and get to it, okay? But I'd like to know from the very beginning how you got into this. How did you get started in music? Did you come from a very musical family, or
No,
was there a person or a thing that got you involved?
it was a single event that took place when I was 7 years old. I grew up on the east coast of Florida, and I went to see, my mother took me to see Dave Brubeck's quartet. And I watched one of my icons, Joe Morello, the drummer, perform, and I was just like mesmerized. And I said I wanted to play percussion and started in the whole school thing at that point. So leading
That's
up to
fabulous.
University of Miami and college, and then graduate work at New England Conservatory, which brought me to Boston.
So do you think, because this is always thing, what came first? Do you think you picked the drums, or did the drums pick you?
Uh, I would say I picked the drums.
Okay.
It's something that I really wanted to immerse myself in conjunction with immersing myself into music. And my first experiences were mostly in jazz music before I became involved with classical music.
Sure, that's the way to go with the whole thing too. What were some of your inspirations back then, besides the Brubeck ensemble? What drummers or what musicians were you listening to that inspired you?
Well, I'd have to say, uh, my performance career allowed me to you know involve myself with many different composers, and this went right from the beginning of my college career. Leonard Bernstein would be a really good example because I got to work with him at Tanglewood as a student. Once I was in Miami, I spent a summer working with the American Wind Symphony in Pittsburgh my freshman year, and to work with somebody like Louis Armstrong when you're 17, 18 years old, it's like wow. Um, and all the different artists that we worked with that summer. And the summers after that at Tanglewood, we worked with Eric Leinsdorf, and Michael Tilson Thomas was a student with me at the time as a conducting student. Eric, working with the Boston Symphony as a student, at that time, working with all these great musicians and hearing all these great composers, really kind of just jump started me to want to just keep going.
Absolutely, and you must have had the real talent right off the bat to be doing that at such a young age in those major orchestras. That's really quite impressive. Do you think students today are missing out on these kind of opportunities, being able to say you worked with those players, with Bernstein, with all these great artists?
Yes, it's very tough. And it's certainly tough right now, given the pandemic, because there aren't any live performances really going on anywhere, for the most part. So to have the opportunity for young students is really, really important, and especially students of color, because they've gotten shut out for so many years with the ability to be able to make it into the ranks of an orchestra, for instance.
Agreed, and even same thing for composers, the same thing. But
Same
I
thing.
think I think this is really big right now in our industry. We're about moving forward, and diversity's the big talk, and it's really well accepted. I totally agree with this. It's even so important that they're talking about changing the audition system and the process
Yes.
behind screens and all this other things. Let's see who you are, let's hear who you are, and let's them fall in love with you no matter who you are.
That's true, and that's happening with a number of different orchestras. They have to change their whole format. They have to change the look of their boards, the trustees that run the organizations as well, and not and the musicians. So yeah.
Exactly right. How important was a music teacher in your early childhood, in your early stages of playing?
Well, I lived in West Palm Beach area, and there was nobody there. I had kind of
Huh?
had to self-teach myself in high school. Went to all the state competitions and all that. but it wasn't until I got to the University of Miami, worked with Fred Wickstrom there. I was a very well-known teacher for the university for many years. And in graduate school, I worked with Vic Firth up in New England Conservatory, where he was the timpanist in the Boston Symphony, a very well-respected educator, and uh, had a company that makes all the mallets, the sticks in the world,
Right.
worldwide distribution. He was a very, very special person, had a great influence on me.
He was quite a force, from what I understand.
Yes, yes, he was. He was the youngest member of the Boston Symphony at the time, and worked there for many years before he retired. And thanks to him, I was enabled to get my positions in the Boston Ballet Orchestra, and the Boston Pops Orchestra, the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra, the Boston Symphony, and
Oh,
I was very lucky. I was privileged.
oh, that's very kind of you. But you're also very talented, and it's a really great thing to say about a mentor like that. Do you feel like he was your mentor, at least in those at that level?
Absolutely. I mean, he just drove you to the through the ground. I mean, he just like really made you think and listen and work toward the ultimate goal of playing perfectly all the time. And if you didn't, you came in your lesson and you weren't prepared. It was a long week.
It was a long week. Good. And in those days, was he making his own sticks at that point, or was
Yes.
the company already making them?
No, he was experimenting with them in his house. I remember this, and then eventually it really took off, and it's a worldwide distribution now, and it's actually part of the Zildjian company. They merged their companies,
Oh, okay.
the Cymbal company.
Fantastic. Like oboe players or any double reed instrument, clarinet players, type of things. Part of their craft is really important craft is to make a reed. Would you feel it's the same intensity for percussionists to be able to make their own sticks to their sound and their flavor?
There's so much available that they don't have to make their own. I mean, that's pretty
Uh,
time consuming. They'd rather be practicing and playing and stuff. I mean, they have a wealth of choices for mallets these days.
when you were studying with Mr. Firth, was he using calfskin or was he using synthetic heads at that point? Because I remember in Cleveland, when I was touring with the orchestra, Claude Duff would tour with his own instruments and had calfskin and had to check them overnight to make
Yeah.
sure they were okay.
I remember him using both when he traveled and whenever they went on the road, and they did a lot of traveling. No, plastic only. In Symphony Hall, at times, yes, he used the calfskin. Eventually, he just rolled over to the synthetic form of playing.
Sure, understood.
It's much more consistent, easy to control, and all that stuff.
Of course.
Yeah.
Great. Let's talk about conductors a little bit because each orchestra has its own sound, each hall has its own sound, and each conductor kind of brings a sound that they think they prefer to hear to a situation. Now, you work with some really heavyweight, great conductors. You said Arthur Fiedler in the beginning, correct? What was he like? Because I find interesting about him is his programming.
Yeah, he had a very innovative programming approach, and he really wanted to relate to audiences.
Right.
Uh, he wasn't the most personable person to interact with from the audience perspective, but he really was able to put together programs that people could relate to. They heard this before. They looked forward to hearing this again. I mean, pieces that were in the movie themes of the day. This is before John Williams, and so that he was really special with that, and he had done that for years.
You could hear a Beethoven symphony on the same program.
You could, you could, or a concerto. In the old pops formats, they had a concerto in the middle of the program, middle third of the program. They had two intermissions, and yeah, it would be a classical beginning, a concerto middle, and then a pops ending format.
Was
That's
that his music? You think that was because of his musical taste, or was he really trying to build an
He was
audience?
trying to build the audience, and creating all those concerts that we did out on the Esplanade alongside the Charles River brought in free concerts to the public, and so he tried to program uh, a different array of styles of music that people could relate to. So the classical music were more of the lighter classical pieces,
Right.
but yeah, Mozart, whatever. They did some light things, and then always a concerto, and then a lot of pops programming, which really everybody loved, and that eventually took over the whole programming. Once he left, John Williams came in. He kept a similar format, but it was more pops in the beginning, movie scores, concerto, and then lighter fare toward the end.
Which was really successful.
Yeah.
Who was tandem to him with the symphony at the time? Was it Charles Munch?
No, it was Leinsdorf for me
Lion.
at the time, Eric Leinsdorf, and then Seiji Ozawa took over, of course, and I worked with him many, many times, and Seiji was just such an inspiration to me personally because he was so musical. He demanded the orchestra have subtlety and nuance and uh, just incredible walls of sound when needed. And I mean, he brought it out. He was able to do that with those very fickle Boston Symphony musicians that were there. And uh, I got to do a concerto with him, a percussion concerto, back in
Wow.
1975. Mamagakis wrote this piece called Anarchia, and there were four percussionists and me as a soloist with different stations around. It was an incredible experience to work with Seiji, and I was enabled to practice at Symphony Hall for 2 weeks before the concerto because they were in Asia on tour. I had
Wow.
the whole place to myself, set up all my things, was able to work on this thing. And because they had asked all these other percussionists around the world, nobody wanted to do it. It was so hard. So
Right.
I was able to do that. And that was a huge break in my career to have done something like that. We did like 5 performances of that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So in essence, it being so difficult, you actually lost the bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Seiji is a conductor that I really admire as well. And he's still conducting beautifully today at his age, and the sound and the color that he gets, he's not really a traditional conductor in the sense of pattern. Would you agree with that?
We talking about John Williams?
No, Seiji
Oh,
Ozawa.
Seiji.
He's not really the traditional conductor with patterns and that other stuff, but he conducts most of the time with 2 hands with such nuance and subtlety and color. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, he extracts the music with his hands, basically. Never used a baton, hardly ever. And I mean, his forte was not Mozart or Bach. It was Berlioz. It was the bigger romantic pieces and contemporary works as well. So, and he was committed to doing contemporary music.
Right, right. Now, since you've worked with all these great names, all these great talents as conductors, and you've been through that orchestra history such a long time, did each personality, once they step on the podium, did it change the sound or did it change the temperature of the orchestra?
Absolutely, and the classic example for me was John Williams when he got the job after Arthur Fiedler. He came in and he made the orchestra have a round, full, lush, controlled sound that I had never heard before, and we took this on the road. We traveled with it, and he just made that sound so different. When Keith Lockhart got the job after John Williams, the orchestra changed. It was a brighter, more controlled sound. He controlled everything a little bit more, and the John Williams definitely let the rhythm section run that latter part of the concert where there's bass, piano, drums as the rhythm section running the orchestra. John let it happen, and it sounded great. When Keith came in, he controlled the rhythm section, so it's a different sound, different sound.
Yeah, it's a different philosophy. Were they doing that with what they said or with what they did?
Both. Keith came in and fired the whole rhythm section, number one. Okay, so that's
Well,
pretty strong action right there, and so it changed immediately. So yeah,
wow.
and to give Keith credit, what he wanted to do was expand the styles of music that the Boston Pops were performing, and felt that the jazz-oriented rhythm section, which had been there for a long time and was wonderful, just couldn't quite handle Brazilian music or Afro-Cuban music, different world styles. And so he brought in other people that could do that.
Right. Did you have much interaction with Leroy Anderson? Because I knew he had a special relationship with the Pops for many, many years. Is that correct? Was he kind of a staff writer?
Correct, for a number of years. He's actually my uncle. No, he's not. No, I'm a
Uncle Leroy.
I
Uncle
always say
Leroy.
that. I shouldn't say that. No, but all of his works certainly were performed over and over and over by the Boston Pops, and people came to know those pieces and just love them and expect to hear them every
Exactly.
holiday time or whatever. They're classics. They're Pops classics.
They are Pops classics. And as a matter of fact, when I go in to do elementary and middle school clinics, little orchestras are playing those arrangements of his music because it's charming. It's not too difficult, and it's really a lot of fun for the kids. So that's really great.
And they're fun for the musicians to play too.
They are exactly fun to play. Super. Well, listen, I know for an Italian conductor, it's important. We're talking about sticks.
Okay.
I want to know what kind of stick weight and length you use to make your marinara sauce as opposed to the clam sauce with the white clams.
All thing I could say is for the red sauce, I use a thicker wooden spatula, and for the clam sauce, I'm gonna use a much thinner olive wood. Got to use
You see,
and it's a lighter texture for that.
you see, this is why you're you. You're you because you are you. That's fabulous. Good answer. Let's talk percussion a bit.
Okay.
Why don't you demonstrate some percussion stuff? Because in my privilege to work with you, the part of me being a conductor, one of the greatest things for me to be a conductor is I get to work with great musicians, great artists who have a wealth of talent and history like yourself. So I'm honored for that. So I'm often amazed on the sound and the colors you get from percussion instruments. I just think that's amazing because there's a lot of people in the world who just bang things and they call themselves musicians, but you have a style, a color, and a real class to your playing.
Well, thank you very much for those comments, but we would need at least 3 hours of a Zoom call to demonstrate all of the different percussion instruments. I mean, it's just
There's going to be thousands, right?
Oh, just thousands, because you have all of the idiophones, the marimbas, the vibraphones, glockenspiels, chimes, all that stuff. You have membronic instruments, drums, snare drum, drum set, tom-toms, congas, bongos, timbales, all this. And you have wood instruments and you have metal instruments. So there's so many under those categories.
And even our hands.
Yeah, and then hands.
And then in 1970s, the car brake drum came into play.
Metal category. I've got 3 of them. So let me at least go through a couple things. Okay.
Super. We appreciate that.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So I'm going to start off with an instrument that's a membronic and a metal instrument, and that's the tambourine, which is a skin on a frame with metal jingles. And you've seen this in the orchestra many times, I'm sure. And generally we hold it with one hand and play it with another hand. And we can play it with fingers or fist to get different dynamic levels or different intensities of the sound by using different parts of our hand. Like we use different sticks on the mallet keyboard instruments, or heavy sticks on snare drum, lighter sticks on snare drum, to achieve different effects. We try to get our hand to do things. For sustained sounds, we can shake it, and I can rub my thumb to get a sustained sound. And if I have to play something fast, and we have large tambourines, small tambourines, if I have to play something fast, I can turn it over and play with my hand and my knee. lots of different things we can do just with this one instrument. Talk about stick.
Dean, excuse me, before we move on, really fabulous. Now, the size of the tambourine itself.
Yeah.
We don't really talk about pitch, but we can talk about depth of color. Is that correct?
Correct. The larger tambourine is going to have a darker, lower color than a smaller.
In an orchestral setting, how do you make that determination of which one? Does the composer indicate in your part what is called for, or is it simply an artistic choice?
An artistic choice, and there are many, many artistic choices made by the percussionists. Conductors like yourself, you have too much to worry about.
Well, the thing is too, and not just that, is that you don't
to consider. So you want to have percussionists who have good ears and know what kind of articulations are necessary in the music that they're performing. And so that gets into different choices of tambourines and sounds, stick choices on the different instruments. Let me give you an example. You all know what this is, right? It's just a block of wood, right? The wood block. And most people have heard this in the orchestra many times. And we usually play the wood block with a hard mallet. So it's very articulate. But I can change the mallet to have it be slightly softer. A wood mallet, thinner sound. A yarn mallet to have a really soft sound. Or rubber over plastic. Those are very different sounds just by changing the sticks. I didn't change the instrument at all.
That's amazing. That's really beautiful. Really beautiful.
Now,
You know, Dean, as a conductor, from a conductor's standpoint, I would never tell a percussionist or any instrument in the orchestra how to play their instrument. We could discuss a color or a dynamic or something, and then leave the choice up to the musician, up to you to make that. Is that agreed?
absolutely.
I heard once a rehearsal in Pittsburgh when I was going to see this conductor. I was all excited to go there, and they were doing this huge work. And he spent the first 25 minutes of the rehearsal having the bass drum player tune the drum. I was appalled by that, and the orchestra was frustrated, and it didn't make much difference. I just think that's ridiculous.
The percussionist should know how to tune the drum because it's going to speak differently at different tensions. It's going to speak differently by using different bass drum mallets. I mean, the percussionist really has to decide that. I got to tell you this funny story. I worked with Fred Fennell when I was in college. Okay, you know Fred Fennell.
Sure.
He was our wind ensemble conductor, and so he was a percussionist. And so I'm playing bass drum in a wind ensemble rehearsal, and he stops and he goes, "No, Mr. Anderson, you have to play with this mallet." And he runs off to his office. And a few moments later, he comes out and he hands this to me. And I said, oh, okay. And he turns around and goes to the podium. But I put the mallet down. I used the same one that I played before. And we rehearsed. And I played the one I played. And he went, voila, that's it. There's a lesson in there somewhere.
Yes, I took notes. Dean, would you do us a favor? Why don't you play something for us and give us a real treat?
Okay, I'd like to do a little Marimba Solar for you guys so you can hear the sound of this instrument because I'm going to be doing a concerto next November, apparently, of the Concertino for Marimba and Orchestra by Paul Creston, which was written in 1940, debuted by Vida Chenoweth, a very famous marimbist in those days. And we're going to be doing it next year. So I'd like to at least have you hear it. So I chose a piece that's something that everybody knows, and it's called Over the Rainbow.
Beautiful. Bravo. Dean, thank you for that treat. Thank you for that treat. It was very, very beautiful.
Okay.
So thank you so much. It was gorgeous. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
I just want to touch on one last thing because we're almost out of time, but in addition to being a wonderful soloist, being a principal percussionist in major orchestras all your life, working with great artists all over the world, you were the head of the Berklee percussion department for many, many, many years, and you taught, inspired, and nurtured percussionists and musicians that are now playing all over the world. Would you spend a couple of minutes just talking about that important part of your life and how music education is important in everybody's life today?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up because to me, my career, my musical career is one thing, and it touched people in some ways, hopefully, but the teaching of first of all, setting up a percussion education program that had 48 faculty that touched upon all of the different musical styles around the world, West African drum ensembles, Brazilian ensembles, just everything, and having the students be exposed to all these different things, and then going out into the world and now seeing them at different venues and gigs and in the music industry, not just performing, all around music therapy situations in hospitals, recording engineers. I mean, you name it, they're out there, and I'm so proud of all of those students, and the students that continue to come out. Even though I retired 7 years ago from that program, left it running just wonderfully, and it's just continuing that way. So to me, that's the biggest impact I've really had on the music, and it had to do with education. Education is the most important thing, and we need to continue to reach out to the students and work with them. And given the pandemic these days, it's really, really difficult to do live music. I know my friend and colleague down in Venice High School, David Wing, he's how hard it is and frustrating it is for him to be working with the band on a regular basis these days. Hopefully that's all going to change with the vaccine, and we all can move forward and have the kids be playing live a little bit more, because it's really hard to do online. And we've tried to do that, and the we I'm talking about is my partner Tita Vankoth, and I have a nonprofit organization called Modern Marimba, and modernmarimba.org if you want to go check it out. And we try to do it's a concert series basically, but it's a concert series in a really difficult time right now. So we've been doing a lot of live stream things, commissioning composers, etc. So I'm trying to do an educational thing at this point as my life as well.
Wonderful. Dean Anderson, you're a fabulous artist, great musician, and now we know you're a great guy. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, everybody. Ciao. I'll see you next time on Behind the Notes. I'm Raffaele.